CMM Live. It's February 27th here, and my name is Joe Campolo, your host. And as you know, at CMM Live, we like to bring Long Island business leaders in to have a chat about some of the most critical items and issues that Long Island's facing. In the past, we've had folks here on real estate and folks here on finance. Today, we're going to talk about construction, right? So construction is a very important industry here on Long Island, has always been. And we're pleased that joining us will be Alex Badalamenti, the CEO of BLD Architecture. Alex, welcome.
Good morning, Joe.
How's everything? Good. Good to see you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Good morning, everybody.
We were just talking about how long it is that we know each other. It's a long time, and Long Island has been through a lot in the time that we've known each other. We had that great recession. I want to talk a little bit about that with you as well. But, you know, I know Alex a long time, and I have to tell you, he's truly one of the most talented architects out here on the island, which is why we invited him along. And what I always have thought has been really cool has been you really got your start in the city with regard to historical landmark buildings and stuff like that, right? So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because it's really a cool experience, I think.
Right. So I didn't study in college to look at historic landmarks. I actually wasn't really that interested in history as a student. But when I moved from Long Island into the city, I worked for a mega firm called Swanky Hayden Connell, and they had just come off a couple major buildings. They were the architects for Trump Tower. They had just finished the restoration of the Statue of Liberty for the Bicentennial. And I went there to get a much broader exposure to architecture and really do some big buildings. And I think we were about 300 people in New York alone. So we were a really huge firm. And I think as I sort of got older and learned more about the profession, you start to realize what you learn from history, that a lot went before us. And buildings really have a soul or a spirit that sort of carries through. So that sort of sparked my interest in it, and I've done a number of projects that have significance.
That's great. So what made you come to Long Island, right? So you're with a mega firm, and at some point you decide to make the shift, and I think it's important to understand what drove you out here. So
primarily quality of life. I enjoyed the city as an architect. It's the center of the world, so it's very attractive to be in the city. So I grew up on Long Island. I grew up in Three Village. My wife is from Port Jeff. We lived in the city for about 10 years. And then when we had children, we had moved to Brooklyn. We were in Park Slope, which is also fantastic.
Yep.
And when my son was born, he was probably about 2 years old, we decided it really wasn't where we wanted to raise our kids. So we looked all over the country. Honestly, we looked in major cities, and we came back really where we started. Family becomes really important, friends are really important, and Long Island community has really a lot to offer that we connected with. So we came back to Long Island, and then it was a question, what am I going to do architecturally here? So I commuted to the city for about another 4 years, which was really miserable. I never saw my kids. I really worked long hours. You know, I saw them on the weekends, and I was so frustrated by the commute. So I eventually started looking for a firm that I could connect with on Long Island and make a difference here.
Was it the upside? So, you know, you looked in major cities. I appreciate that. So I guess the initial thinking was, well, we'll live on Long Island and I'll still work, you know, in the city. Was it that you saw a tremendous opportunity out here on Long Island for architectural services, or was it you were just totally burnt down on the city? What brought you here?
I think it was a slow transition, and eventually I realized how much I really love this community, and I wanted to bring part of what I learned in Manhattan, the level of precision and expertise in Manhattan, to Long Island, and I wanted to bring that with me. And it was really the epiphany, Joe, was a reconnection to the community of Long Island, how important it is to me growing up, how important it is to my kids, and to other generations. So I want, and as a firm, what we're focused on is really bringing quality level design to Long Island.
Yeah, and that's the challenge. So we talk a lot about millennials. We talk a lot about, about workforce and workforce challenges, and we'll get into that in a minute because I'm
Yep.
sure that you guys have your workforce challenges. But what I really like about you personally and your firm is, there is a handful, and I use the term handful colloquially, but there's a handful of really top-notch professionals that perform out here on Long Island that could go anywhere in the world
Sure,
and perform, right?
Sure.
And they're rare
sure.
because they have taken that plunge from, hey, I could be making 3-4 times what I'm making now if I was doing this in the city, but I'm okay, making less,
Yeah,
as long as I can truly practice my art
right.
and live in the community that I'm comfortable with. And I think that that's a really important message to get out there to young folks as well. And it sounds like that's been your experience.
Yeah, I think, and our philosophy at Build has changed too. It's not about buildings. It's about relationships. And we're positioning ourselves as thought leaders on Long Island. Our goal is to be more of an architectural think tank that provides value to our clients. It's not an elitist sort of attitude. We're not looking to make the flashiest or the most progressive building. What we're trying to do is understand a client's priorities, what their objectives are, and how do we really inform them to making very, very good decisions. Because the field we're in is expensive. Buildings are expensive, there's a lot of risk, so it's all about trust. And I bring to the table 30 years of experience from when I worked in London to working in Manhattan. And I bring very smart people to my office that are likable. And it's important to me that you're likable.
Yeah, so a couple things. So your company you're calling Build, not BLD. I hear a lot of people
Yeah.
say BLD, but I'm going to go with you because
Yeah, sure.
you're the guy, right? So it's
Sure.
Build. And you have a quote that I think is really interesting. You say, while as architects we are not builders, Build celebrates the origins of the architect as the master builder. And so what do you mean by that? What are you thinking along those lines?
So I think as human beings, we are fundamentally builders. We like to build things. Back in the 14th, 15th century, or even go back to early Christianity, there weren't formal architects or engineers. They were master craftsmen that understood the practice of building, and they learned about design. It wasn't until really the late 18th and probably, I should say, late 19th and early 20th century that the real form of architecture as educated architects and engineers came about. So I think there is something about the craft of building, understanding building, that is important to an architect, that we're not just designing a building that is superficial in what it looks like, but also the integrity of what goes into it. Its systems, its zoning, its capacity, its yield, all of those things are important to it. And the term build was largely a compression. We started with BLD, my name is really, impossible, and Baldacano was really an impossible name, and there was a lot of confusion over it. But I didn't want an eponymous firm, where that name meant the firm was about me. It's really not about me. I look at it that, yes, I'm leading the firm, I'm leading the culture, but I have a lot of extremely talented people that do all of the work.
Right. So let's talk a little bit because, like I mentioned, I know you a long time, right? And we rode the 7, 8, 9 years together, which were very, very, difficult years. And I can remember conversations that we had where you were like, I don't know if we can sustain this. I don't know if I have to go back into the city. I don't know. So talk a little bit about sort of that and the rebranding that you've had to go through. Because I think it was genius, and you're now doing super well. So I think it's really important that people understand that hiccups happen and how you work out of them.
So going from employee to owner is a major shift, and not to be taken lightly. I guess I'd always been fortunate or lucky where I was working. I always worked in great firms with great people. The recession, and I'd gone through the sort of dot-com, recession, and then there was because I started in the city in the 80s, then there was the 90s recession, which lasted about a year. It was sort of a blip. And what surprised us in 2008 was we didn't know we were in a recession. It took at least 6 months before anybody was actually talking about that we were in a recession. So we unfortunately were over-leveraged in 2008. We held on to staff and costs way longer than we should have because we thought, well, if things were just slowing down and they would pick up again. But then the duration of the recession, 4 or 5 years, really hurt. And it hurt personally. With my wife is a professional too, and she was sort of questioning, what have you done? What are we going to do? We're going to lose our house. So all of those things started weighing down. So it took a lot of years to restructure. It took a lot of hard conversations with a lot of people, and we found clients, people who, we found out really who our friends were. And Joe, you were definitely one of our friends. You stuck with us. We had a lot of people who let us borrow their time to sort of work through, and I think the integrity of who we are, what we stood for, I think is sort of an American ideal, and I think people were sympathetic to that. And we struggled. We're still struggling with a couple final issues, but we're thankfully solid, and we have a lot of very good, diverse clients. So I would say, number one, to any entrepreneur out there, be mindful of debt. Yeah. Back in 2008, 2007, everybody said, don't use your own money, use everybody else's money. That was sort of the idea. So you were able to leverage your AR into borrowing more money than you probably should have. And I was not as mindful. It really wasn't what I was focused on in the firm as I should have been, and it was a tough time. It did teach us to be very nimble, which I would say we are now, and we're very thankful for every client we have. It's that important to us.
Yeah, and it's an important message because truly great business leaders always, at some point in their history, have gone through adversity, right? And that's what you learn.
Sure.
When things are well, you think you're a genius. It's when things are really tough that you learn. And watching you guys, I couldn't be more happy or more proud of you watching you guys now come out of that and truly be design leaders here on Long Island. But there are challenges. So like lawyers, right, clients don't understand value.
Right.
They can view architectural services as a commodity. I need to get drawings, I need to get this done. So what's been your challenges, and how have you gotten your value proposition, out there to folks?
Yeah, it's really hard to make that value-added argument. And for the last 10 years, nobody's interested in it. Very few are interested. We're coming out of it now. So it had become a commodity. So fee services were all about the bottom line. And we ended up taking projects less than our cost, only to give people something to do. So we were actually busy but losing money on those projects, but we needed to stay active.
Right.
And there were days we were going to work, the phone stopped ringing, projects we had underway stopped, clients stopped paying or basically went bankrupt. So we sort of got left holding the bag on a lot of those things. And you go into survival mode to a degree, but I think there is a fundamental belief and conviction or commitment that things will improve. And I'm sure, Joe, you and I had these conversations. It was really a matter of sort of a stick-to-itness, do what you know, what you enjoy. And I couldn't imagine doing anything other than what I do. From when I was a kid to today, this is what I enjoy doing, so I couldn't see not doing it.
Yeah, and your passion clearly comes through in the projects that we work on. You're constantly passionate about it. And look, developers need that, right?
Sure.
They need motivation. There are so many landmines and so many delays, and I feel it on my end, on the legal end. I'm sure you feel it on your end, and we have to stick together. But really, what's impressed me the most are the quality of projects that you guys are doing now. And
Sure.
You come from a point where you say, the phone's not ringing, to now you're doing, you know, award-winning projects out here on the island, which are incredible. So let's talk about,
Sure.
you know, let's talk about some of the Boulevard project was a big one, a great one, right? Talk about that
Tough
a little
one.
bit. Yeah.
So Cape Advisors came to us, also a victim of the recession. So Buyer Blinder Bell, Jack Bell, who was a great guy, New York City historic firm, been around for a long time. They were working with Cape up until 2006. They couldn't get the project financed. It sort of hit a roadblock. It was pegged at about $65 to $70 million in 2006. So it basically went on hold for about 4 or 5 years. And Cape Advisors had gone to Racanelli Construction, to Nick, and said, well, who would you recommend? We need to value engineer this project. We need to get it financed. So Nick had known I had done a number of landmark historic projects and our sort of passion for doing the right thing. So we met with Cape, we interviewed with them amongst other firms, they selected us, and then we started the project. The first goal was to bring the budget in line. It's a really, really challenging project. So we worked on that with Racanelli, sort of almost in a design build sort of capacity. And then we got it financed by Deutsche Bank. And then we started doing the drawings, you know, after the fact. What was difficult about that project? It was in Sag Harbor. It had been a blighted building for 25 years. If anybody doesn't know the building, Bullish manufactured watch cases in the late 19th century to, I think, about 1980. They just ceased operations. And a lot of the town, as like many towns, the lace mill in Patchogue, Port Jefferson had shipping. There were industries that really allowed the community to grow. So Sag Harbor grew because of the watch case factory. The building was about 100,000 square feet, built in the 1850s, and had been boarded up for 30 years. It had some environmental issues underground, and so we had to remediate all that. We had to strip the building down, and then we added 9 townhome buildings in addition to the 100,000 square foot factory building, and an underground parking garage, and a pool, and a rec center, all in a historic village. The noise, the digging, I mean, all really frustrating. Working in Sag Harbor.
They love that in Sag Harbor.
Oh my gosh. So there was a lot of involvement because people wanted it. I mean, a blighted building which had so much potential to it. Really meant a lot, but going through 3 years of sort of pain and suffering, it's hard to convince people that things will get better. But it's been a huge success. It's
gorgeous. Absolutely, it's absolutely gorgeous out there. And you know, we hear and talk a lot about Paul Pontieri's vision and success in Patchogue, and I know you guys had your fingers in that pie for a while. So talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a true Long Island success story, right?
Yeah, so, and actually we were so committed to it, we moved our office to Patchogue because of the renaissance that was happening in Patchogue. And Paul is, everybody talks about Paul. Not only is he a genuine Long Islander, he's a genuine person. You know, he's a sincerely nice guy and a very smart guy. But Paul was a facilitator. And that's really, as a mayor or in government, which we need more of, is real leadership. So Paul believed the developers could do good things for Patchogue, and that by building residential, by building the YMCA, it would bring life to Patchogue. And I think it's a very simple formula, but it works. But it takes a lot of strong leadership in the realm of public opinion to make that happen. So we were the first major building to go up in Patchogue. We did the YMCA, which there was a concern at the time, it's too big a building. You know, it's 55,000 square feet. Is it going to fit in? It was on a really crazy site. It was a remnant parcel that when they took down the lace mill, they had buried all of the debris in the site. So there were a lot of issues surrounding it. But we decided to design it as a neighborhood of buildings. So rather than one big mammoth 55,000 square foot building, we broke it into smaller components. And again, the design's been a big success. They're really doing well, and it was sort of the flagship building for the redevelopment of Patchogue.
So you mentioned something that I think is really important, right? So Paul is, in nice guy, normal guy, and a hands-on facilitator. I think that's completely accurate. And we seem to be lacking those on Long Island, although I see a shift, right? So with Ed Wareheim coming in in Smithtown and some other key electeds, there may be a shift going on here. You know, what do you see? How do you see the climate for development now on Long Island?
I think it's improving, especially with the economy. It's improving. We made a quote 10 years ago. They had asked us, what's the future of Long Island? And we said it's downtown redevelopment, you know, if we can, you know, make it happen. And it's because there's so much red tape. You know, I think we said, actually, if we can keep out of our own way.
Right.
So, but yeah, Ed's a great guy. You know, in Smithtown, I think Smithtown really needs to take stock in it. But Long Island, if you go back, you know, centuries, those downtowns were very organic. There wasn't master planning going on in 1785, you know, 1800s. It had all of those downtowns, Port Washington, Port Jefferson, Sag Harbor, all had the right key elements for development at the time. And so I believe they will continue to be the right destination spaces for redevelopment. It's just our culture is changing. So the buildings need to change and evolve with that growth. But growth is a great thing. Patchogue has a booming parking problem. That's a good problem to have, you know.
Yeah, and we're seeing it. I mean, Port Jeff, they're putting the apartments down in Port Jeff. It's you know, it's much needed. Let's shift a minute to workforce, right? So
Sure.
one of the challenges that we have, that I'm sure that you have, is because of proximity to New York City, right? It's a constant struggle and challenge to attract talent. So what's been your guys' focus? How have you been approaching and attacking that problem? How have you guys been handling it?
It's hard. Our biggest problem is with millennials. In our business, it takes a lot of young talent. You need to harness young talent because there's a lot of work that needs to be done at a lower pay scale. I mean, it's just the economy of fees. We can attract intermediate to senior talent fairly easily because everybody comes here for the same reason that I did. Quality of life, you're ready to start a family, great. Young talent wants to be in the metropolitan area. So Patchogue, Huntington, Port Washington, the more sort of walkable, livable spaces that are affordable in those areas, workforce housing, is a good attraction to encourage and retain capital. So what we have done, we network as best we can for young talent. We also opened a satellite office in New York City. We figured if we can't draw the talent here, let's draw it from the city. And you know, because of computers and technology today, it's really a small, you know, distance.
It's full functioning office though? You have people working there?
It's still a share space right now.
Yep.
You know, we realized we needed enough projects in the city to justify opening the office because we need a senior person really there full time. So, so we're almost there. You know, we're testing that market right now, but we've had no problem attracting young people into New York City. It's just I'm not ready just yet. So we have the space, we have the location, we have some projects in the city.
So what percentage of your projects do you think are in the city versus Long Island based?
Dollar-wise?
Or percentage-wise, yeah.
Percentage-wise, probably 20, 30%. I mean, we work right now from Montauk to Westchester. So we have some projects in Hunts Point, a couple in Brooklyn. I would say 20% as far as volume-wise, but dollar-wise, probably 50, 60% because the size of the projects in the city are much larger, and the logistics of doing a project in the city are much more intense.
Yeah, so last topic I want to talk about is, you know, you as a CEO, right? So you've had to grow and change many times over your career, and now as the CEO, as the, you know, the buck stops with you. What is your perspective? What is your day-to-day like? How does that all changed?
So yeah, it's a great question. So when I first started out, it was always about design to me. I thought it was about the building. I thought it was about the design of the building. That was everything. As I you know, matured, and got more
Slightly.
experience, slightly, to some degree, whatever. It's about service. More than anything, it's more about our clients than it is about us. So we spend an initial amount of time understanding what the client's goals and objectives are, so we're not spinning our wheels in the wrong direction. We do buildings, as you know, from FedEx to single-family homes.
Right.
The program for a FedEx industrial building is so different than it is for a single-family home. So you don't design them the same. So we try to be nimble, flexible, understand our clients, and really give them what they want. We're really guiding. So my day-to-day role, I'm managing the staff. I'm really responsible for the overall culture. I'm responsible for client responsiveness. It's very important to me that any of my staff responds immediately, call people back. I mean, really basic sort of things. And I make sure that our first step, our strategic first step, is in the right direction.
Yeah, so last question, Long Island's economic outlook, right? You're bullish, you're bearish, you're cautious. What do you think? Particularly with the midterm elections coming up, how do you feel about it?
I think I'm bullish. I want to be bullish. I think I've always been optimistic. I think that Long Island has great people. It has great architecture. It has great landscape. I think all of the right elements are there. Right now we're missing, I think, office space, quality office space. We built the housing market. I mean, we're doing 500 units of multifamily right now, so we're addressing that. I think the retail sort of market is dwindling because of all of the online services. I think that'll change. I think how you shop is going to change in the future. You know, you still need to sort of see and touch things, but I think you'll basically order from a kiosk.
It's great.
But I think that'll scale down. I don't think that the commercial market on Long Island for quality office space has caught up just yet.
Yeah, and that's coming. So, folks, we hope you enjoyed our program. We were lucky to be joined today by Alex Badalamenti, the CEO of Build Architecture. I'm glad I got that. I'm glad I got that right. I'm going to correct people now because everybody calls it BLD.
It's good either way.
And really, I enjoyed the personal experiences that you shared with us. Alex truly is one of the most talented architects we have here on Long Island, and we're happy that he feels safe and comfortable and bullish here. So thanks so much for joining us.
Good, and likewise, Joe. We love everything you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.